I'm Verna Thompson, 65 years old, and recently retired after 32 years as an elementary school teacher in Springfield. My only son Brian and I were inseparable until he married Allison 5 years ago. When my husband passed, he left me financially secure with a substantial life insurance policy. I've always been generous with Brian, even helping with the down payment on their beautiful home. I never thought my kindness would lead to being locked out in the freezing cold on Thanksgiving Day. Before I start my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how I taught my ungrateful family a valuable lesson about respect by hitting them where it hurt most, their wallets. After my husband Robert passed away 7 years ago, I found myself adjusting to a new life, alone, in the 4-bedroom house we had shared for nearly 30 years. The first year was unbearably quiet, but I gradually adapted to widowhood. Robert had been meticulous about our finances, leaving me with a paid-off mortgage, a healthy retirement account, and a substantial life insurance policy that ensured I would never have financial worries. Brian was my only child, born after years of struggling with fertility issues. From the moment I held him, he became the center of my world. Robert and I poured everything into giving him a loving home and the best opportunities. As a teacher, I took on extra tutoring hours to save for his college fund. Brian was a bright, thoughtful boy who excelled academically and made us proud every day. When he left for State University to study engineering, I missed him terribly, but called him every Sunday evening without fail. He'd share stories about his classes, his roommates, and eventually, during his senior year, about a girl named Allison he had met in his advanced calculus class. I first met Allison at Brian's graduation ceremony. She was undeniably beautiful, with long auburn hair and a dazzling smile. She greeted me warmly, complimenting my dress and asking thoughtful questions about my teaching career. But there was something in her eyes when she looked at Brian's modest used car, or when she mentioned her own parents' vacation home, that gave me pause. It was a subtle flicker of judgment, quickly masked with charm. Their courtship progressed quickly after graduation. Brian landed a promising position at an engineering firm, while Allison pursued her master's degree in business administration. They dated for 2 years before Brian proposed with a ring that cost him 3 months' salary. I remember him calling me nervous about whether it was expensive enough to impress Allison and her family. Their wedding 5 years ago was lavish, held at a vineyard owned by Allison's family friend. I contributed $20,000 toward the celebration, though Allison's parents insisted on controlling most of the planning decisions. My suggestions for including some of our family traditions were politely acknowledged, but ultimately ignored. I noticed the first real changes in Brian shortly after they returned from their honeymoon in Bali. His weekly calls became less frequent and shorter. He began checking with Allison before committing to family gatherings. His opinions on everything from politics to what kind of car to buy seemed to shift to align with hers. When they started house hunting, I offered to help with the down payment. Brian was hesitant, but Allison quickly accepted. I provided $75,000, nearly a third of the down payment, on their 4,000-square-foot home in Oakwood Estates, an exclusive neighborhood with excellent schools. I never asked for formal repayment, considering it an investment in my son's happiness and future. The birth of my granddaughter, Emma, 4 years ago, was one of the happiest days of my life. I brought home-cooked meals for 2 weeks, did laundry, and stayed overnight to help with feedings. When Jackson arrived 2 years later, I did the same. Though I noticed Allison seemed less appreciative of my assistance, often redoing tasks I had completed or making comments about outdated childcare practices. I treasured being a grandmother, volunteering to babysit whenever they needed. Emma and I developed a special bond. I taught her to bake my famous snickerdoodle cookies and read her the same bedtime stories I once read to Brian. Jackson was still too young for many activities, but his face would light up whenever I arrived, arms outstretched for a hug. As time passed, tensions with Allison grew more noticeable. She'd make comments about my clothes being a bit mature or suggest that my house was cluttered and old-fashioned. She'd correct my grammar in front of others or interrupt my stories to tell her own. Brian never defended me during these moments, often staring at his plate or changing the subject. Despite the growing discomfort, I continued helping with childcare 3 days a week while they worked. I also contributed to unexpected expenses. New tires for their SUV, emergency plumbing, repairs, the children's swimming lessons. I wanted to be the supportive mother and grandmother I had always envisioned being. But with each passing month, I felt increasingly like a convenience rather than a beloved family member. When Allison redecorated their living room, discarding the handmade quilt I had given them as a housewarming gift, Brian explained they were going for a more modern aesthetic. When she enrolled Emma in an expensive private preschool without consulting me, despite my background in early childhood education, I swallowed my hurt and contributed to the tuition. My friends noticed the changes in our relationship, but I defended Brian and Allison, making excuses for their behavior and focusing on my beloved grandchildren. Little did I know that these small disappointments were merely setting the stage for what was to come. The first truly painful slight came on my 65th birthday. Brian had promised a special celebration dinner with the family at Giovanni's, my favorite Italian restaurant. I had been looking forward to it for weeks, even buying a new dress for the occasion. That morning, I received a text from Brian. "Sorry, Mom need to cancel tonight. Work emergency. We'll make it up to you." I was disappointed, but understood that emergencies happen. I spent the evening alone with a small cake I had bought myself and a glass of wine. The next day, while scrolling through Facebook, my heart dropped. There were fresh photos of Brian, Allison, and the children at Adventure Kingdom, an amusement park 2 hours away. They were smiling in front of a roller coaster, time-stamped during the exact hours we should have been celebrating my birthday. When I gently confronted Brian, his face flushed. Mom Allison had already purchased the tickets as a surprise for the kids. I couldn't disappoint them. It wasn't personal. "You could have told me the truth," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Allison overheard and joined the conversation. "Verna, we didn't think you'd enjoy an amusement park anyway. We were going to reschedule your dinner for next weekend." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were cold. No rescheduled dinner ever materialized. This incident began a pattern. Invitations to Sunday dinners would be rescinded last minute. Plans to take the children to the zoo would be canceled because they were too tired, only for me to see social media posts of them at a neighbor's pool party the same day. Promises to visit became more infrequent and were broken with increasing regularity. I began to feel like an afterthought in their lives, someone to be fitted in when convenient or when they needed financial assistance or babysitting. My friends suggested I speak up more firmly, but I worried about damaging my relationship with my grandchildren. What if Allison restricted my access to Emma and Jackson? The thought was unbearable. As October turned to November, discussions about Thanksgiving began. For the past 6 years, since Robert passed, I had hosted Thanksgiving at my home, preparing all the traditional dishes Brian had grown up loving. This year, however, Allison had other ideas. "We think it's time we host Thanksgiving at our house," she announced during a Sunday visit. "Our dining room is much larger, and we have the playroom for the kids. It makes more sense logistically." "Mom's house isn't really set up for little ones anymore," Brian added, avoiding my eyes. "Our place is more suitable for children." Though hurt, I nodded in agreement. "That sounds nice. I am happy to bring some dishes. My stuffing recipe has been in the family for generations." "Actually," Allison interjected, "I've planned the entire menu already. I'm doing a more modern, healthy take on Thanksgiving. Quinoa, stuffing sugar-free cranberry compote, and a free-range heritage turkey. The children are developing more sophisticated palates." Brian quickly added, "But you're welcome to bring wine or dessert, Mom." I felt dismissed, but smiled through my disappointment. "Of course, I'll bring a nice bottle of red and maybe an apple pie. What time should I arrive?" "Dinner will be at 6, Brian said. "But feel free to come around 4 if you want to spend time with the kids before they get tired." In the days leading up to Thanksgiving, I shopped carefully for gifts for everyone. For Brian, a leather-bound edition of his favorite childhood book to share with his children. For Allison, an expensive cashmere scarf in her favorite color. For Emma, a handmade sweater I had knitted over several weeks. And for Jackson, a wooden train set similar to one Brian had treasured at his age. The weather forecast showed an unexpected cold front moving in with possible snow, unusual for our area in late November. I prepared accordingly, charging my phone, filling my car with gas, and packing an emergency kit, just as Robert had always insisted upon. The morning of Thanksgiving brought gray skies and a sharp drop in temperature, but I was determined to join my family for the holiday. By afternoon, light snow had begun falling. I carefully wrapped all the gifts, packed the apple pie I had baked, despite Allison's implied dismissal, and selected a bottle of Cabernet from the collection Robert and I had curated. I dressed warmly in my nicest winter outfit, applied makeup, and styled my hair, wanting to look my best despite Allison's frequent comments about my outdated appearance. The normally 20-minute drive took nearly 45 minutes with the deteriorating road conditions. By the time I pulled into their circular driveway, the temperature had dropped significantly, and the snow was falling steadily. Both Brian's and Allison's cars were in the driveway, along with another vehicle I recognized as belonging to Allison's sister. Arms loaded with gifts, wine, and pie, I carefully navigated the slippery path to their front door and rang the doorbell. I waited, shifting the packages in my arms, but no one came. I rang again, thinking perhaps they hadn't heard over holiday music or conversation. Still no answer. I knocked louder, my fingers growing cold despite my gloves. Looking through the decorative glass panels flanking the door, I could see lights on inside and hear faint laughter. Standing on the porch with my arms full of gifts, I pulled out my phone and called Brian. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. Growing concerned and increasingly cold, I sent a text. "I'm outside on the porch. Can someone please open the door?" No response. I tried Allison's phone next. Again, straight to voicemail. I sent texts to both of them. "It's getting very cold out here. Please let me in." The temperature was dropping rapidly, now hovering around 15 degrees, with a wind chill approaching -10. My fingers were becoming numb, making it difficult to hold my phone. I set down the packages and peered through the side window more carefully. What I saw froze me more thoroughly than the bitter wind. The family was gathered around the dining table, Brian, Allison, the children, Allison's parents, her sister, and brother-in-law, all seated together, passing dishes, laughing. They were already eating Thanksgiving dinner. A beautiful turkey sat at the center of the table, surrounded by side dishes, on Allison's designer tableware. The scene was like something from a holiday magazine, perfect and complete. Without me, my heart pounding, I knocked harder on the window, but no one turned. Either they couldn't hear me over their conversation, or they were deliberately ignoring me. I returned to the door, ringing the bell repeatedly and knocking until my knuckles hurt. Finally, my phone buzzed with a text from Brian. "Sorry, Mom. Dinner started at 5, not 6. I stared at the message in disbelief. Brian had specifically told me 6 o'clock. I was certain of it. I typed with trembling fingers. "You told me 6. I'm outside freezing. Please let me in." Minutes passed before another text, this time from Allison. "We're already in the middle of dinner. Maybe you should just go home and we can reschedule. The kids are getting distracted by the doorbell." I couldn't process what was happening. My own son was leaving me outside in dangerous cold while enjoying Thanksgiving dinner with his in-laws. My eyes burned with tears that froze on my cheeks. I tried the door handle irrationally, hoping it might be unlocked, but it was secured. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my keys twice, trying to get back to my car. I couldn't feel my fingers or toes anymore. The wind had picked up, driving the snow horizontally across the yard. As I struggled with my keys, a voice called out, "Mrs. Thompson, are you okay?" It was Trevor, the teenage son of my neighbors across the street, taking his dog for a quick walk. I can't get in. They're not answering." I managed, my voice quavering from cold and emotion. Trevor immediately called to his mother, Lisa, who rushed over from their house. Seeing my condition, she helped me to their home, while Trevor gathered the gifts I had brought. Inside their warm kitchen, the reality of the situation hit me fully. Lisa wrapped me in blankets, while Trevor made hot tea. My outer clothes were covered in snow, my fingers and face painfully red. I couldn't stop shivering. "You're showing signs of mild hypothermia," Lisa said, her nursing training evident in her assessment. "How long were you out there?" "Almost 40 minutes, I whispered, embarrassment washing over me. My own son wouldn't let me in. Lisa's face hardened. She took my phone and called Brian herself. "Brian, this is Lisa Parker from across the street. Your mother is at our house showing signs of hypothermia after being left outside your home for nearly an hour. No, this isn't an exaggeration. I'm a registered nurse. No, she's not being dramatic. The temperature is below freezing with dangerous wind chill. I'm considering taking her to urgent care. Well, if you're too busy with dinner to be concerned about your mother's health, I suppose we'll handle it." She ended the call, her expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I'm taking you to urgent care. That's not a normal response from a son whose mother might have hypothermia." At the urgent care facility, the doctor confirmed mild hypothermia, an early frostbite risk in my fingers and toes. As he applied warming treatments, he gently asked how I had been exposed to such conditions. The humiliation of explaining that my own family had left me outside was almost worse than the physical discomfort. After treatment, Lisa insisted I join her family for Thanksgiving dinner. Her husband and children welcomed me warmly, setting an extra place as though they had been expecting me all along. I tried to maintain composure, but in the car on the way back to their house, I broke down completely. "I don't understand," I sobbed. "What did I do to deserve this? Those are my grandchildren in there. That's my son. How could they just leave me outside like I'm nothing?" Lisa held my hand as I cried, offering no platitudes, just the simple comfort of human connection, something my own family had brutally denied me on a day meant for gratitude and togetherness. That night, I barely slept in Lisa's guest room. My body was recovering from the cold, but my heart felt shattered beyond repair. The image of my family enjoying their perfect Thanksgiving dinner while I stood freezing outside their door played on repeat in my mind. Morning brought a casual text from Brian. "Hope you found somewhere for dinner last night. Weather got bad." No apology, no concern, no acknowledgement of leaving his mother outdoors in dangerous conditions. Just a text that might be sent to a casual acquaintance. I didn't respond. Instead, I found myself scrolling through social media, masochistically searching for evidence of the evening I had been excluded from. I didn't have to look far. Allison had posted a series of photos, tagged "Perfect Family Thanksgiving." There was the gleaming table I had glimpsed through the window. There were Brian and Allison raising wine glasses in a toast. There were Emma and Jackson, dressed in coordinating outfits I had never seen. There were Allison's parents, sister, and brother-in-law, all smiling as though nothing was amiss, as though a family member wasn't missing. The comments were effusive. "Such a beautiful spread. You're such a wonderful mom and hostess, Allison. Family goals." But it was the final photo that broke something fundamental inside me. Emma was wearing the hand-knitted sweater I had brought as a gift, the one that had been in the packages left on the porch. Underneath, Allison had captioned, "Cute thrift store find, for Emma only $10 for this vintage-style sweater." They had taken my gifts, the ones Trevor had collected, and presumably returned to them. And Allison had passed off my handmade creation as a second-hand purchase. Hours of love and work reduced to a vintage-style bargain. I felt physically ill. My chest constricted painfully, tears flowing unchecked. In that moment, I realized I had become invisible to them, useful for financial support and occasional childcare, but not worthy of basic human dignity or acknowledgement. Through my tears, my thoughts suddenly shifted to finances. Over the years, I had become deeply financially entangled with Brian and Allison. There was the joint account I had established for the grandchildren's college fund, containing nearly $60,000. The emergency account, to which Brian had access, holding $25,000 for unexpected family needs. The monthly automatic transfers I had set up for the children's activities and expenses, $800 for Emma's private school enrichment programs, and Jackson's developmental playgroups. I had co-signed the loan for their family SUV when Brian's credit had been temporarily affected by an identity theft incident. Recently, they had approached me about contributing to private elementary school tuition for Emma, estimated at $15,000 annually. All these financial connections flashed through my mind, along with memories of smaller expenses I had covered, without question, Allison's laptop, when hers conveniently broke before an important presentation, the backyard playground equipment that cost nearly $4,000, the emergency veterinary bill for the puppy they had adopted against my gentle advice about the responsibilities involved. I remembered my financial advisor, Warren's concerned expression during our last review. "Verna, I worry that the financial support is very one-sided. Have you considered establishing more formal arrangements for these gifts?" I had dismissed his concerns, assuring him that family took care of each other. But now, shivering despite the warm blankets, I wondered who was taking care of me. Lisa knocked softly before bringing in a tray with breakfast and coffee. She sat beside me as I recounted the additional discovery of the social media posts. "Verna," she said carefully, "being generous doesn't mean being a doormat. There's a difference between supporting family and being exploited. What they did yesterday wasn't just thoughtless, it was cruel." Her words crystallized something within me. I had been a teacher for 32 years, guiding children to understand consequences and boundaries. Yet, I had failed to establish or enforce any boundaries with my own adult son and his wife. With sudden clarity, I reached for my phone and called Warren. "I need to make some changes to my accounts," I said, when he answered my voice steadier than it had been since yesterday. "All of them. How soon can we meet?" Warren, hearing the resolve in my voice, immediately offered to see me Monday morning. "Are you all right, Verna? This sounds urgent." "I'm fine," I replied, surprising myself with how true it felt in that moment. "I'm finally seeing things clearly. I'll explain everything on Monday." As I ended the call, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. This wasn't about revenge or anger. This was about self-preservation and, finally, self-respect. Monday morning, I arrived at Warren's office 15 minutes early, a folder of financial documents in hand. The weekend had given me time to think, to plan, and to document the pattern of financial support I had provided over the years. Warren welcomed me with concern evident in his expression. "Verna, I was worried about you. This isn't like you to request an emergency meeting." I explained the Thanksgiving incident in simple factual terms, showing him the text exchanges and social media posts. His professional demeanor slipped momentarily, revealing genuine shock. "I've been enabling behavior that has escalated to this point," I concluded. "It stops today." Together, we systematically reviewed every financial connection between myself and Brian's family. First, we froze the joint college fund account I had established for the grandchildren. "We're not eliminating their education funding," I clarified. "We're restructuring it so that it can only be used for its intended purpose." Warren suggested creating separate 529 education accounts directly for Emma and Jackson, with me as the custodian and them as beneficiaries. "This protects the money from being diverted to other uses," he explained. Next, we removed Brian's access to the emergency fund account. "If there's a genuine emergency involving the children, I will still help," I said. "But it will be on my terms with transparency." We canceled the automatic monthly transfers that had been supporting various family expenses. Warren helped me draft a formal notice about the termination of these payments. For the co-signed car loan, we contacted the bank to discuss my options. While I couldn't remove myself as co-signer, without refinancing, we could establish monitoring alerts for any missed payments that might affect my credit. Finally, we updated my will and estate documents with new provisions. My grandchildren would still be provided for, but through protected trusts rather than direct inheritance or access accounts. "These changes are protective, not punitive," Warren noted, seeming relieved by my calm approach. "You're establishing healthy financial boundaries." After our financial review, I met with Sandra, a family attorney recommended by Warren. She helped me draft a clear communication to Brian, documenting the Thanksgiving incident and outlining the financial changes being implemented. The email was factual and unemotional. "Brian, I am writing to formally document the events of Thanksgiving Day when I arrived at the agreed-upon time of 6:00 p.m. to find myself deliberately excluded from the family gathering. Despite multiple attempts to contact you, I was left outside in dangerous weather conditions, resulting in medical treatment for hypothermia. Effective immediately, I have made the following financial changes. The joint college fund has been frozen pending restructuring. Your access to the emergency fund has been removed. Monthly transfers for children's activities have been discontinued. Monitoring has been established on the co-signed vehicle loan. No further financial contributions will be made toward private school tuition. I remain committed to supporting my grandchildren's well-being and education through properly structured and protected accounts. My conditions for rebuilding our relationship include family counseling and a formal acknowledgement of an apology for the Thanksgiving incident. I am open to healing our family bonds, but not at the expense of my dignity or financial security. My financial and legal advisors have been copied on this communication. I sent the email Tuesday morning. Within minutes, my phone began ringing. Brian calling repeatedly. I didn't answer. Text messages followed first, confused, then angry, then pleading. I read them all, but responded to none. Later that afternoon came a voicemail from Allison. Verna, I can't believe you would punish the children for what was clearly a miscommunication about timing. This is extremely inappropriate and damaging to our family. You need to reconsider these drastic measures. By evening, the tone of the messages had shifted. Brian, Mom, please call me back. I know we messed up. We need to talk about this. Allison, Verna, perhaps we all need to take a step back and discuss this rationally. The children are asking about you. I maintained my silence, following Sandra's advice to give them time to process the reality of the situation before engaging. On Wednesday afternoon, a knock at my door revealed Brian standing alone on my porch, looking disheveled and anxious. For the first time in years, I spoke to my son with complete honesty. I will not be treated as an ATM with occasional grandmother privileges, I said quietly. What happened on Thanksgiving wasn't a miscommunication. It was deliberate exclusion, and it was cruel. Brian's eyes filled with tears. Mom, it was Allison's idea to change the time. She said it would be easier with the kids' schedules, but I should have called you. I should have stood up for you. This isn't about blaming Allison, I replied. You're a grown man who made choices. You chose to leave your mother outside in freezing temperatures. You chose to ignore my calls and texts. You chose to post happy family pictures while I was receiving medical treatment for hypothermia. He flinched at the directness of my words. I'm so sorry, he whispered. We never meant for you to get hurt. But I did get hurt, Brian, physically and emotionally. And this wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of increasingly disrespectful treatment. I outlined my conditions for moving forward family therapy, a genuine apology from both him and Allison, and new boundaries around both our personal and financial relationships. I've given you both tremendous financial support over the years, I said. That support was given with love, not as a transaction. But when basic respect and decency are missing from the relationship I need to protect myself. Brian left that day looking subdued, without making his usual empty promises or excuses. Despite the difficulty of the conversation, I felt lighter than I had in years. The pain was still there, but alongside it was something new: self-respect. That evening, I called several old friends I had neglected while prioritizing Brian's family. I registered for a watercolor class at the community center. Small steps toward rebuilding my own life, regardless of what happened with Brian and Allison. as word of what had happened spread through our extended family and friend circle, I received unexpected support. My cousin Janet called from Arizona. "It's about time you stood up for yourself, Verna. We've all been worried." My former teaching colleague, Patricia, brought dinner one night. "I wish you had told me sooner what was happening. No one should be treated that way by their own family." The approaching Christmas season, which had initially filled me with dread, now felt like an opportunity to establish new traditions and connections. I volunteered to help with the community center's holiday event for seniors living alone. I bought thoughtful gifts for Lisa and her family, who had shown me more kindness than my own son. Whatever happened next would be on my terms, with boundaries firmly in place. A week passed with no further contact from Brian or Allison. I maintained my resolve, focusing on self-care and rebuilding connections outside my immediate family. The sense of loss was profound, particularly missing my grandchildren, but I reminded myself daily that healthy boundaries were necessary for all relationships. On Saturday morning, an unexpected knock at my door revealed Emma standing on my porch, holding the hand of an older woman I recognized as Dorothy Allison's mother. "Grandma Verna," Emma exclaimed, throwing her arms around my legs. "I missed you." Dorothy looked uncomfortable, but managed a tight smile. "I hope you don't mind us stopping by, Verna. Emma has been asking about you constantly." I welcomed them in my heart, both warmed by Emma's affection and wary of Dorothy's presence. As Emma settled with a coloring book I kept for her visits, Dorothy and I moved to the kitchen for a difficult conversation. "Allison doesn't know we're here," Dorothy admitted, accepting the coffee I offered. But I couldn't stand by any longer. What happened on Thanksgiving was unconscionable. I listened in surprise as Dorothy continued. "I want to apologize for not speaking up when you were left outside. We were told you had canceled because you weren't feeling well. When Brian received those texts, Allison said you were just seeking attention. I should have questioned it, should have insisted someone check." Dorothy went on to reveal troubling patterns I hadn't been fully aware of. Allison had been systematically isolating Brian from various relationships. Old friends who suddenly stopped receiving invitations, a cousin whose calls went unreturned, colleagues whose dinner invitations were declined. I was just the latest and most significant connection being severed. "There's more you should know," Dorothy continued hesitantly. "Their financial situation isn't what it appears. Allison has a shopping addiction she's kept hidden from everyone. Credit card debt, secret accounts. Brian is afraid to confront her about it." This revelation added context to their increasing financial requests over the years. The designer furniture, luxury vacations, and expensive children's activities weren't just about status. They were symptoms of a deeper issue. "I'm worried about my grandchildren," Dorothy confessed. "This environment isn't healthy. The material excess combined with the emotional manipulation. Emma asks about you every day, and they tell her you're too busy to visit." By the end of our conversation, I had a clearer picture of the dynamics at play, and a surprising ally in Dorothy. Before leaving, she suggested a family meeting after the new year with a professional mediator present. "I'll talk to Brian separately," she promised. "He needs to understand what's at stake here, not just financially, but the emotional well-being of his entire family." 2 days later, I received an email from Brian accepting my terms. He had scheduled an appointment with a family therapist recommended by his employee assistance program and asked if I would attend. The first therapy session was tense and tearful. Brian, Allison, and I sat in uncomfortable silence until the therapist, Dr. Rebecca Winters, skillfully guided us into meaningful conversation. "I'd like to understand what happened from each perspective," She began, starting with the events of Thanksgiving. Hearing Brian and Allison recount their version was difficult. Allison admitted to deliberately changing the dinner time, without informing me, claiming she was tired of my interference in their holiday traditions. Brian confessed to knowing about the change, but avoiding conflict by not telling me. "I was a coward," he said, his voice breaking. "I've been a coward for years, watching how they treated you and saying nothing." Winters identified the unhealthy dynamic that had developed. It appears Verna has been positioned as both essential for financial support and emotional caregiving, yet simultaneously treated as an outsider whose presence is tolerated rather than welcomed. Over subsequent weekly sessions, painful truths emerged. Allison reluctantly acknowledged her resentment and jealousy of my relationship with Brian and the children. Brian confronted his failure to stand up for me and his use of my financial support to avoid addressing problems in his marriage. I shared my hurt at being taken for granted and excluded from family milestones while still being expected to provide financial assistance. The conversations were difficult, but necessary. Gradually, we established new parameters for our relationship. Financial arrangements were restructured with professional oversight. A schedule for grandchildren visits was created initially at neutral locations like the park or children's museum. The first such visit was emotional. Emma ran to me immediately, chattering about school and her new art projects. Jackson was initially shy, hiding behind Brian's legs, but eventually warmed up when I produced a picture book he had always enjoyed. Brian watched us interact with tears in his eyes. "I almost ruined this," he whispered when the children were distracted. "I almost lost you because I was too weak to do what was right." Small steps toward rebuilding trust followed. Sunday dinners with clear beginning and end times. Direct communication rather than passing messages through Brian. Allison's participation in a support group for compulsive spending behaviors. Brian taking financial responsibility courses through their bank. By Valentine's Day, I received a card clearly made by Emma, with Jackson's scribbled contribution at the bottom. Inside was a note from Brian and Allison. "We are working to become the family you deserve. Thank you for not giving up on us." It wasn't perfect. There were still difficult moments and old patterns that threatened to resurface. But there was also genuine effort and accountability, something that had been entirely missing before. 6 months after the Thanksgiving incident, our family had established a new dynamic, one built on mutual respect rather than exploitation. My individual therapy journey had been particularly revealing, helping me recognize how my own need to be needed had contributed to unhealthy patterns. Generosity without boundaries isn't actually generosity, my therapist explained. It's often a form of control or fear of losing connection or relevance. This insight helped me establish healthier financial relationships, not just with Brian's family, but in all areas of my life. I learned to say no without guilt, and yes, without resentment. The restructured financial arrangements were functioning well. The separate trust funds for the grandchildren's education were secure with legal protections, ensuring they would be used as intended. Brian had taken full responsibility for the family budget, implementing transparency measures that helped rebuild trust with both me and Allison. Allison's work in therapy showed in subtle but significant ways. The competitive edge in her voice when discussing other family members had softened. Her social media posts became less about portraying perfect family moments and more about authentic connections. She had even started a small accountability group for other women struggling with compulsive spending. Easter celebration at my home marked our first holiday reunion since Thanksgiving. I felt nervous, preparing, uncertain if old wounds would reopen, but determined to create new, healthier traditions. The dinner was simpler than past gatherings, intentionally so, focusing on connection rather than impression. Before the meal, Brian asked for everyone's attention. He had prepared a speech that brought tears to my eyes. Last Thanksgiving, we failed as a family in the most fundamental way. We excluded someone who has given nothing but love and support. I failed as a son, and we failed as parents in the example we set for our children. Mom, your strength in setting boundaries while still leaving room for reconciliation taught us more than years of enabling ever could. Thank you for the difficult gift of consequences and for the chance to rebuild what we nearly destroyed. Emma had made a special place card for my seat, decorated with a drawing of Grandma's special chair, where we read stories together. Jackson, now more verbal at almost 3, insisted on sitting beside me, occasionally patting my arm as if to make sure I was still there. As I looked around the table at my imperfect but healing family, I reflected on the painful journey that had brought us to this point. The freezing cold of Thanksgiving had been necessary to shock us all into awareness of what was at stake. My financial leverage had been a temporary tool, not for revenge, but for creating space for genuine change. Lisa and I had maintained our friendship, her family becoming an important part of my expanded support network. My volunteer work at the community center had blossomed into a part-time position, coordinating literacy programs for seniors and children, reconnecting me with my teaching roots in a new, fulfilling way. I often wondered what Robert would think of the woman I had become in his absence. The quiet widow had found her voice. The accommodating mother had learned to demand respect. The generous grandmother had discovered that true generosity includes self-respect. Love doesn't mean enduring mistreatment or enabling unhealthy behaviors. Sometimes the most loving action is establishing firm boundaries and allowing natural consequences to unfold. I had frozen their access to funds, yes, but in doing so, had thawed something much more important: authentic relationship built on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. Our family photo that Easter, everyone included with genuine rather than forced smiles, sits on my mantle now. It reminds me daily that sometimes a temporary freeze is necessary for new, healthier growth to begin. If you've ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your generosity, share your story in the comments below. How did you find the strength to set boundaries with those you love? Remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to value themselves in family relationships. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to teach people how to treat you with the respect you deserve.